Adrian Sterling had everything money could buy, but he still didn't know if love could be trusted. The heir to the Sterling Empire, groomed in glass towers and chauffeured cars, looked untouchable to the outside world. But inside he was a man haunted by doubts so heavy they silenced even his laughter. When Adrian left a blank check for the woman he claimed to love, Sophia James, he wasn't testing her pen, he was testing her heart. Why would a man so rich need proof of love? How did his life of wealth turn into a prison of suspicion? And what would Sophia write that would either seal their future or destroy it? Tell me, if the same blank check was left on your table tonight, what would you write? Adrian's doubts did not come from nowhere. They were born in the cold shadow of his father, Victor Sterling. A tycoon whose fortune spread across continents, Victor was a man who valued contracts over compassion, mergers over marriages. Trust no one, he had always told his son. Especially women who come with nothing but soft words. These words echoed louder after Eleanor, Adrian's mother, died. Eleanor had once been a brilliant pianist, known in Europe for her gift of turning sorrow into music. But when she married Victor, her world of melodies was replaced with marble halls and cold dinners. She lived surrounded by chandeliers yet starved of warmth. In the end, wealth suffocated her spirit. Adrian never forgot the image of his mother's lonely figure at the grand piano, playing songs only she could hear, until she could play no more. From then on, Adrian believed two things. Love was fragile and money corrupted everything it touched. Yet he still yearned for both. But the heart rarely listens to fear. Years later, on the sunlit lawns of Cambridge University, Adrian met Sophia James. She was everything his world was not, humble, hopeful, and carrying a strength that came not from power but from survival. Raised by a single mother who stitched dresses to keep the lights on, Sophia grew up with nothing but the determination to never let poverty break her dignity. Adrian hid his wealth when he first met her, fearing she'd see only dollar signs. To his surprise, she saw only him. They fell in love over coffee in rain-soaked cafes, whispered dreams under old oak trees, and laughter that belonged to no empire. For the first time, Adrian thought he had outrun his father's curse. But love invites envy, and every empire has enemies. Ethan Blake, Adrian's childhood friend, saw Sophia not as love but as a threat. Ethan carried his own hidden obsession for her, masked behind polite smiles but sharpened with jealousy. With every step Adrian and Sophia took closer together, Ethan whispered poison into Adrian's ear. "She loves your name, not your soul." Adrian wanted to believe Ethan was wrong, but Victor's cold voice always returned, "Trust no one. Especially her." And so, between the ghost of his mother's pain and the shadow of his father's words, Adrian began to wonder. Was Sophia truly the love he thought she was, or another betrayal waiting to happen? Sophia James grew up in a world where love was free but bread was not. Her earliest memories were of dimly lit rooms that smelled of fabric glue, her mother bent over a sewing machine late into the night, and the sound of her stomach growling quietly in the dark. She learned early that life owed her nothing, but character, resilience, and honesty were treasures no one could take. Her mother, Clara, was the quiet strength of her childhood. A seamstress with hands roughened by needles, Clara believed dignity was worth more than comfort. "Money can put food on the table, Sophia," she often said, "but it cannot buy you peace in your heart." She never remarried after Sophia's father left, choosing instead to bear her struggles with grace, even when hunger knocked louder than hope. Sophia's father was a ghost she both hated and longed for. He had promised forever but delivered nothing. One morning he simply disappeared, leaving a note so vague it felt like an insult. "I'll come back when I can give you the life you deserve." He never returned. His absence carved into Sophia a permanent distrust of promises tied to wealth. But it also fueled her resolve to never let money define her worth. Still, scars have a way of hiding behind smiles. To her friends, Sophia was the girl who dreamed big, studied hard, and carried herself like she belonged even when she didn't. But alone at night, she often wondered if poverty made her invisible, if love could ever truly see her beyond the shadow of lack. It was this mixture of strength and quiet insecurity that Adrian first fell in love with. At Cambridge, she stood out not because of what she wore. Her clothes were simple, sometimes thrifted, but because of the way she carried herself. Sophia had the rare gift of making others feel seen, as if she had carved space in her heart for everyone she met. To Adrian, who had grown up in a palace of suspicion, that warmth was intoxicating. But here lay the seed of their eventual storm. Sophia believed love was about loyalty and sacrifice, but she underestimated how deeply Adrian's wealth haunted him. And Adrian, blinded by the ghost of his father's warnings, underestimated how fiercely Sophia guarded her dignity. Sophia's world of scarcity was her armor, but it was also her weakness. She had built her identity around not needing money, yet beneath that strength, the absence of it still whispered in her thoughts. Could she really walk away from financial security if it was handed to her? Could she reject wealth without also feeling like she was rejecting the security she never had? These questions lay dormant, unspoken, waiting for the day Adrian's test would awaken them. Because love thrives on trust, but trust can crumble under the weight of doubt. And the day Adrian left that blank check, Sophia would not only confront his suspicion, she would also confront the silent battle she had carried since her father walked away. Adrian Sterling lived in a world of polished floors and silent halls, but Sophia James lived in a world of crowded buses, second-hand books and part-time jobs. Fate collided their worlds in the unlikeliest of places, the campus library at Cambridge. It was raining outside, a steady drizzle tapping against the old stained glass windows. Adrian, dressed simply to avoid attention, sat tucked in a corner, pretending to study but really hiding. He had grown tired of people who saw him only as a Sterling, a ticket to influence, a ladder to climb. That afternoon, however, fate placed Sophia at the next table. Her hair was slightly damp from the rain, her clothes plain but neat, and her focus fierce as she scribbled notes with a borrowed pen. She looked like someone who had fought too hard to be there to waste a single moment. When her pen suddenly broke, ink blotting the margin of her notebook, Adrian instinctively slid his spare pen across the table without a word. Their eyes met. Hers were wary at first, she had grown used to pity and she hated it. But Adrian's gaze wasn't pitying. It was curious, gentle, almost grateful. That small gesture sparked hours of conversation. She spoke about literature, about how stories had saved her from despair. He spoke cautiously about philosophy, avoiding any mention of business empires or family fortunes. Sophia assumed he was an ordinary student, perhaps with a modest upbringing like hers. Adrian did not correct her. For the first time in years, someone seemed to like him for who he was, not for what his last name could buy. Coffee dates followed, then long walks under the ancient arches of Cambridge, where laughter echoed like promises. Sophia admired Adrian's quietness, mistaking it for humility, while Adrian admired Sophia's fire, mistaking it for fearlessness. They filled each other's gaps without realizing they were building on foundations of half-truths. But cracks were already forming. When Adrian finally revealed his true identity, heir to the Sterling Empire, Sophia froze. For her, money was not just wealth, it was abandonment, betrayal, the root of her father's broken promise. Her instinct was to pull away. Yet Adrian's vulnerability when he confessed made her stay. He didn't boast about it, he almost apologized for it. She saw not a billionaire's son, but a man terrified of being unloved for who he was. Still, a shadow lingered. Sophia told herself she didn't care about the money, but every once in a while late at night she would picture the safety it could bring. A steady home for her mother, a future without hunger, a life her father failed to provide. Adrian, on the other hand, told himself Sophia loved him for himself, but his father's words clung like chains: trust no one, especially women who come with nothing. For now love drowned out the doubts. Their worlds had collided and somehow merged. But as they laughed under raindrops and whispered promises beneath the oak trees, neither could see that their unspoken fears were already writing the script of their downfall. Because love can bridge worlds, but secrets, even unspoken ones, can burn them down. Every love story has its villains, but sometimes they wear familiar faces. For Adrian and Sophia, the first was Victor Sterling. The second was Ethan Blake. Victor Sterling was a man who had built empires with contracts sharper than swords. To him, marriage was not about love but leverage. When Adrian first mentioned Sophia, Victor did not bother to hide his disdain. "Your mother was a woman of talent," he said coldly one evening over dinner. "Yet she still ruined herself because she thought love was greater than legacy. I won't watch you repeat her mistake. That girl wants what every outsider wants, access to sterling money." Adrian clenched his fists but said nothing. He remembered his mother's empty gaze at the piano, how she had died in a house filled with everything except happiness. He wanted to shout that Sophia was different. But the silence of his childhood, the conditioning of mistrust, weighed on him like chains. If Victor was the external enemy, Ethan Blake was the hidden one. Ethan had grown up beside Adrian, their father's business ties making them more like brothers than friends. But where Adrian inherited wealth, Ethan inherited envy. He had always played second in the classroom, second in their social circles, second even in affection from Adrian's late mother, who once told Adrian, "Your kindness is your strength." Ethan never forgot it. When Sophia entered Adrian's life, Ethan saw an opportunity. He had admired her from afar, her humility, her quiet determination, but what he felt was not love. It was hunger. She was the one thing Adrian had that he could not touch, and that made her irresistible to him. To Adrian's face, Ethan smiled and played the loyal friend. But behind his back he whispered, "She's different around you because she knows who you are," Ethan murmured one night over drinks. "Don't you think it's strange? A girl from nothing falling for a man like you? Think about it, Adrian. You're not her boyfriend. You're her future. And without your money, would she even be here?" The words slid into Adrian's ears like poison, feeding on the cracks his father had already carved. He tried to shake them off, but they returned in quiet moments. When Sophia admired a beautiful dress in a shop window, when she sighed about bills her mother still struggled to pay, when she looked just a little too long at the security his name provided. Sophia, oblivious to the war being waged around her, continued to love Adrian with the innocence of someone who had nothing to prove. She never saw Ethan's glances that lingered too long, or Victor's disdainful eyes watching her at every Sterling family gathering. She believed love could conquer mistrust. But love is fragile when enemies whisper from both sides. Victor and Ethan, though different in intent, shared a mission, to make Adrian doubt. And slowly they succeeded. Adrian began to question not just Sophia's motives, but his own ability to see the truth. Because the greatest enemy of love is not betrayal. It is suspicion. Scandals don't always begin with lies. Sometimes they begin with truths no one was ready to face. For Sophia, that truth came knocking in the form of a man she hadn't seen in 15 years, her father. It was a gray afternoon when he appeared outside her small apartment, thinner than she remembered, his hair streaked with gray, his suit frayed at the edges. Charles James had once promised the world, but now he looked like a man crushed beneath it. "Sophia," he said, his voice trembling with shame, I need help." For a moment, Sophia froze. Memories flooded her. The morning he left, the note he scribbled, the endless nights she and her mother cried together. Anger surged, but so did pity. He was her father after all. Against her better judgment, she offered him food, a place to sit, even some money to tide him over. She told herself it was duty, not love. But what she didn't know was that neighbors saw him enter. And what neighbors see, tabloids can twist. Within a week, headlines splashed across glossy covers. Sterling heir's girlfriend supports bankrupt father, gold digger genes? Sophia James, true love or family strategy? The story spread like wildfire. Photographs of Charles James stumbling out of Sophia's apartment, his worn shoes captured in high resolution, became symbols of shame. Reporters camped outside her home. Online forums tore her apart, branding her everything from opportunist to parasite. Adrian watched in silence, the storm building inside him. He wanted to defend her, to scream that Sophia's worth had nothing to do with her father's failures. But Victor's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Blood doesn't lie, Adrian. She comes from desperation. Sooner or later, desperation always cashes in." Ethan fanned the flames. "I tried to warn you," he whispered. "This is who she is. You're blinded and one day you'll regret it." Sophia meanwhile held her head high. She never explained the details to Adrian, never begged for him to believe her. To her, defending herself against lies would give them power. She told herself dignity mattered more than reputation. But her silence became a double-edged sword. Adrian admired her strength, but the unanswered questions lingered. Why had she let her father back into her life at all? How much money had she given him? And what if, deep down, she did see Adrian as a safety net against the same kind of ruin her father embodied? The love between them still burned, but shadows had begun to creep in. Where once Adrian saw only her laughter, now he also saw the headlines. Where once Sophia trusted Adrian's faith, now she sensed his hesitation in the pauses between his words. Love can survive hardship, but can it survive scandal? And when the world is watching, is love still love, or is it performance? Unbeknownst to them, this was not just a storm to weather. It was the first crack in the glass palace they had built. And through that crack, suspicion would seep until it poisoned everything. Every man has a breaking point, and Adrian Sterling reached his the night his father confronted him in the family's grand dining hall. The long mahogany table stretched endlessly, set with silverware polished until it gleamed. But the room was colder than winter itself. Victor sat at the head, his gaze sharp, his glass of whiskey untouched. Adrian entered late, his thoughts already burdened by the tabloid storm around Sophia. "She will ruin you," Victor began without preamble. His voice was not raised, yet it carried the weight of command. First her father, now the press. How much more humiliation will you endure before you see the truth? Adrian's jaw tightened. Sophia is not her father. Victor leaned forward. Blood is blood. Desperation is inherited. You think she will resist what your mother couldn't? Eleanor loved me once, but she loved my wealth more. And when it suffocated her, she broke. You will see the same in Sophia, only this time it will destroy you. The words cut like knives. Adrian wanted to shout that his mother had been broken not by greed, but by loneliness. Yet deep inside he wasn't sure anymore. Doubt had already taken root, watered daily by Ethan's whispers and the world's judgment. Victor delivered the final blow. If she truly loves you, prove it. Test her. Otherwise, you're nothing more than a fool blinded by a pretty face. That night, Adrian drove back to his apartment, his mind a storm. He replayed Sophia's laughter, her stubborn dignity, the softness of her hands in his. But over and over the question returned, what if my father is right? Ethan's voice echoed in his head, you're not her boyfriend, Adrian. You're her future. Without your money she wouldn't stay. By the time he reached his desk, Adrian's heart was in chaos. He pulled out a checkbook, his hand trembling as he wrote his name. But when it came to the amount he froze. What figure could measure love? What sum could expose the truth? Slowly, painfully he left it blank. The pen rolled from his fingers, clattering against the desk, the sound like a gunshot in the silence of the room. He stared at the paper, his chest heavy. Was this brilliance, a way to silence every doubt once and for all? Or was this weakness, proof that he had already failed to trust the woman he claimed to love? He told himself it was fairness. If Sophia was the woman he believed her to be, she would leave the check untouched. She would rise above suspicion just as she always had. But beneath that thin shield of reasoning was fear, fear that perhaps she wouldn't. Near midnight, Adrian entered Sophia's room quietly. She was asleep, her face peaceful, her hair spilling across the pillow like a crown of shadows. He placed the check on her bedside table, staring at it one last time. The blank square on the page glared back at him like a mirror. In that moment, Adrian Sterling did not test Sophia's heart. He exposed his own. Sophia woke to the soft glow of morning light streaming through the curtains. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. She stretched lazily, then her eyes fell on the object that changed everything, a piece of paper resting on her bedside table. It was not just paper. It was a check. Her heart skipped. Adrian's familiar signature glared at her from the bottom, bold and final. But where the amount should have been written, there was only emptiness, a blank space, infinite in possibility, suffocating in meaning. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. At first she thought it must be a mistake. But the longer she stared, the more the truth clawed at her chest. This wasn't an accident. This was a test. Memories rushed in like a flood. She remembered her father's broken promise. I'll come back when I can give you the life you deserve. She remembered the way her mother stitched gowns she could never wear, her hands bleeding just to keep food on the table. She remembered the sting of the tabloids, calling her a parasite, a gold digger, a woman scheming for sterling money. And now, Adrian. The one man who swore he loved her differently. The one man who made her believe love could exist without suspicion. He had reduced her to the very stereotype she fought her whole life to escape. Her first instinct was fury. She wanted to rip the check into shreds, to storm into his study and throw the pieces at his face. How dare you doubt me? Her heart screamed. But another voice whispered, quieter yet sharper. What if this is the only way to prove him wrong once and for all? Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, her breath uneven. She imagined what others might do. Some would leave the check untouched, hoping silence would speak louder than any words. Others would cash it in, proving Victor and Ethan right. And a few, perhaps, would walk away forever, too proud to stay after such an insult. But Sophia was not like others. She thought of Adrian, his haunted eyes, the shadows of his father's warnings, the scars left by a childhood where trust had been strangled before it could bloom. This wasn't just about money. It was about his fear. His brokenness. His test wasn't of her but of himself. Slowly Sophia picked up a pen. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips as ink met paper. She didn't write a number. She didn't write excuses. Instead, she carved a single sentence across the empty line. If you doubt me, you don't deserve me. Her hand shook as she set the check back down. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were not from weakness. They were from clarity. Sophia wasn't walking away, but she wasn't begging to stay either. She was forcing Adrian to decide, trust her or lose her. The check that once screamed emptiness now carried words heavier than any number could. And as she closed her eyes again, her heart whispered the truth she already knew. Love without trust is just another kind of poverty. Adrian rose late that morning, his mind clouded by restless dreams. The memory of leaving the blank check by Sophia's bedside clung to him like smoke. He hadn't wanted to test her, yet here he was, a man torn between love and suspicion, between his father's shadow and his own heart. He entered her room quietly, bracing for an answer he wasn't ready to face. Sophia was gone, but the check lay neatly on the table. For a heartbeat, relief washed over him. She hadn't taken it. She hadn't left him. But when he picked it up, the world tilted. Written in Sophia's delicate, defiant hand were words that seared into his chest. "If you doubt me, you don't deserve me." His knees nearly buckled. The message wasn't rejection, but it wasn't forgiveness either. It was a mirror, showing him the very flaw he feared in himself. He wanted to believe it was love, but her words carried a quiet ultimatum: choose trust or lose her. Before he could process it, the world came crashing in. Ethan, ever watchful, had discovered the check in Sophia's room before Adrian did. He had taken a photo, one that soon leaked to the press. Within hours, headlines screamed across tabloids and online feeds. Sophia Marks rejects sterling wealth. Is it true love or calculated move? Billionaire's girlfriend calls out his distrust in viral check incident. The public divided like wildfire. Some praised Sophia. Finally, a woman proving love is more than money. Others condemned her. She's playing the victim to win sympathy. Clever gold digger move. Victor saw the chaos as validation. In the next family meeting, his words struck like hammers. Do you see now? The world will never accept her. Even her silence becomes scandal. You think you can build a future on that? Adrian slammed his fist against the table. This isn't about the world. This is about me. About us. Victor sneered. No, son. This is about the sterling name. And you're gambling it away on a girl who writes riddles instead of loyalty. Ethan added fuel, his voice oily with false concern. Adrian, think carefully. If she loved you, she would have ignored the check. By writing anything at all, she made it about pride. Do you want a woman who tests you back? Or one who stands by you? The words gnawed at Adrian's already fragile certainty. His father and friend framed Sophia's defiance not as strength but as rebellion. And rebellion in the sterling world was dangerous. But then Adrian remembered the way Sophia's eyes lit when she taught children in the community center, the way she refused expensive gifts but cherished handwritten notes, the way she carried dignity even when the world spat on her name. Her words weren't rebellion. They were truth. And yet, could love survive when the entire world was watching, dissecting, and doubting? Adrian clutched the check like a lifeline, but he couldn't shake the question burning in his chest. Had Sophia saved their love, or doomed it? The air between them was heavier than stone. Adrian stood in the doorway of Sophia's apartment, the check trembling in his hand like a weapon. Sophia sat at the table, a half-drunk cup of tea before her, her back straight, her eyes steady. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of the city beyond the window filled the silence. Then Adrian broke it, his voice low, brittle. Why did you write this? He held up the check, his throat dry. Why not just leave it blank, untouched? That would have been enough. Sophia's lips curved into the faintest of sad smiles. Enough for you maybe. But not for me. Her calm cut deeper than anger. Adrian's voice cracked as he stepped closer. Do you know what this has done? Ethan found it. It's everywhere now. The press, my father, everyone has an opinion about us. About you. I know. Her tone was even, but her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. But I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for you. Adrian's chest tightened. For me? Yes. She leaned forward, her voice finally trembling with emotion. Because I've spent my whole life proving I'm not what the world says I am. A beggar. A user. My father's daughter. And for a while I thought with you I wouldn't have to prove anything. But then I woke up to this. She gestured toward the check. Do you have any idea how it feels to be tested by the man I love? Her words struck like arrows. Adrian wanted to speak, but guilt tangled his tongue. Sophia's eyes glistened now, but her voice sharpened. You think you're the only one haunted by the past? My father's mistakes shadow me everywhere I go. I live every day fighting to be seen as my own person, not his stain. But last night, Adrian, when you left that check, you told me you didn't see me either. You saw him. The truth cut him open. Adrian dropped the check on the table, his voice breaking. I don't doubt your love, Sophia. I doubt myself. I grew up watching my mother drown in my father's wealth, watched it crush her spirit. I'm terrified that history is repeating itself and I don't know how to stop it. Sophia's anger softened, but only slightly. Then why punish me for your fear? Why ask me to bleed for wounds I didn't cause? Tears burned Adrian's eyes. Because I don't know another way. All my life, love came with conditions. Power, wealth, legacy, it was always a transaction. You're the first person who made me believe it could be different. But I don't know how to trust what I can't measure. Silence fell again. Sophia reached across the table, her fingers brushing the edge of the check. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Then maybe it's time you stop measuring, Adrian. And start believing. The room stilled as though the world itself held its breath. For the first time, Adrian realized the real test was never hers. It was his. The night was hushed, the city's lights flickering against the windows like restless stars. Adrian and Sophia sat across from each other, the check lying between them like a battlefield truce. Adrian finally exhaled, his voice low but steady. You're right. Trust isn't something you test. It's something you give. Sophia studied him, her expression unreadable. Then why did you test me at all? Adrian hesitated, then pulled something from his jacket pocket. Another piece of paper, aged and folded at the edges. He laid it gently on the table beside the check. Sophia frowned. What's this? He pushed it toward her. My mother's letter. She wrote it the week she left my father. I never showed it to anyone. With trembling hands, Sophia unfolded the letter. The handwriting was delicate, almost fragile. Adrian, it read, if one day you find yourself in love, remember this. Wealth can buy loyalty, but it cannot buy trust. Test the world if you must, but never test the heart of the one you claim to love. If you do, you will lose them before you realize what you had. Sophia's breath caught. Her eyes lifted to Adrian, wide with shock. I found this when I was 19, he whispered. But I was too young, too broken to understand. And when I left that blank check, I realized I was becoming the very man she feared I'd be. Distrustful. Controlling. Blind. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. For a moment, anger melted into something else. Sorrow, maybe even compassion. But before she could speak, Adrian continued. That's why I leaked the photo myself. Sophia's heart stopped. What? Adrian's eyes locked with hers, filled with both guilt and resolve. Ethan didn't leak it. I did. I wanted to see how the world would react. To see if their voices mattered more to you than mine. It was cruel. It was reckless. And it was wrong. But I had to know if our love could survive the fire. Sophia's hands shook as she pushed the check away, her voice breaking. So it wasn't just about me. It was about testing everyone? Adrian nodded slowly, shame heavy in his posture. Yes. And now I've realized something I should have known from the start. Love doesn't survive because it passes tests. It survives because two people choose to believe in it, even when the world doesn't. The room fell silent. Sophia's tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, So what now, Adrian? Do I forgive you, or do I walk away? For a long moment, Adrian didn't answer. He slid the blank check toward her again, his voice trembling. This time, I'm not asking you to prove anything. I'm asking you to decide if I'm worth forgiving. Sophia stared at the paper, then at the man she loved. Her decision hung in the air, heavier than wealth, louder than scandal. The screen faded to black before her choice was revealed. And the question burned in every viewer's mind. Was love enough, or was the test the very thing that destroyed it?